Nothing could have prepared Daniel for the chill that crawled up his spine as he drove past the lake that morning. His cabin, the place he'd poured every ounce of energy and savings into, was alive with activity. Strangers bustled in and out. Someone was measuring windows, and a professional sign staked in the grass. Private, no trespassing, by order of HOA. He'd heard rumors about the president's power plays, the whispered warnings that rules were always bent for some and cracked down on others. But Daniel never imagined seeing his own home, claimed in broad daylight. How could someone simply take what belonged to him? And how far would she go to keep it? This was the moment everything changed. Daniel had fallen in love with the lake community years before, seeking peace and a space to create art after a stressful period in the city. The neighborhood promised serenity, towering pines, sun dappling on the water, weekends spent fishing, and evenings by the fire pit. He wasn't the chattiest member, but kept his cabin immaculate, paid his dues, and believed in minding his own business. For many, the homeowners association was just part of the deal. At first, Daniel barely noticed the meetings or casual patrols, but he quietly paid attention. He saw who set the tone. Karen, the president, a fixture in every decision, her authority rarely questioned. She knew everyone, and everyone seemed to know her. There were whispers about her family snapping up investments, her little projects. But most neighbors simply kept their heads down, finding that friction tended to bring heat. Daniel wasn't prepared for things to change. After a dispute about dock space, a minor misunderstanding, he became the focus of Karen's attention. Small things at first, a citation for an overgrown bush that wasn't, reminders about approved paint colors, and increasingly persistent emails about lake safety and neighborhood decorum. Daniel handled these with patience, convinced it was all just a string of bad coincidences. Yet a pattern began to emerge. Karen wanted things her way. Resistance, even polite, was unwelcome. He brushed off the tension, until the day he came home to that yard sign and the lock on his door had been changed. Daniel's shock spiraled into disbelief. He tried his code on the lock twice, then 3 times, before realizing the keypad was entirely new. On the window was a typed notice sealed in plastic. By direction of the HOA board, this property is under the administrative care of Karen's last name. Any inquiries must be directed to the HOA office. No phone number, no details, only Karen's stamp at the bottom. He paced the yard, calling the association, voicemail. He messaged neighbors. Their responses were clipped, uncertain. For days, Daniel hit a bureaucratic wall, emails unanswered, letters ignored, and only the odd glance of a neighbor from behind a half-closed curtain. The story trickled out. Rumors spread that Daniel hadn't paid fees, false, that he rented the property to non-members, false, or that his cabin required emergency care. Meanwhile, Daniel noticed Karen's son, Connor, coming and going. A moving van arrived. New curtains appeared. Daniel realized with mounting horror that his lake cabin was being emptied of his things and refurnished. His home was no longer his. Driven by desperation, Daniel began digging. Rereading old HOA newsletters, scanning meeting minutes posted online, asking around about bylaw changes. He uncovered a subtle pattern. Over the past year, Karen had orchestrated several rules changes that expanded the board's right to assume care of properties deemed abandoned or mismanaged. In every case, it was Karen who initiated the investigation. Karen who led the committee. Karen whose family or associates profited from purchases or reassignments. One late night, shuffling papers with a flashlight on his porch, Daniel found a recent clause, approved with only 2 signatures, hers and the vice president's, allowing the board to reassign usage of properties neglected for a period of 60 days. Daniel had never been away for more than a week, a fact easily proven with billing and camera logs. Armed with evidence, he called a special HOA meeting. Karen dominated the quorum, insisting Daniel's case was under review. Neighbors averted their eyes. Daniel's frustration crested into resolve. On a hunch, he filed an open records request, uncovering emails between Karen and her son, discussing transferring the lake cabin soon. It was proof. Karen was gaming the system for her family's gain. Determined not to let injustice slide, Daniel plotted his next move. He realized that subtle appeals, polite emails, and quiet patience weren't going to protect what he loved. If Karen wanted to play public games, he would answer with something she couldn't ignore. with permits for a temporary construction barrier, a right all homeowners technically had but rarely used. Daniel rented chain link fencing and brightly colored privacy tarps. Over the course of a tense Saturday, under the wary eyes of neighbors and the shocked gasps of passersby, Daniel erected a fence. Not merely around his cabin, but stretching in a wide, unmissable loop around the HOA office itself, making entry tricky and inconvenient. He posted clear signage. "This fence is a visual protest. Property rights matter. Ask your board what happened to my home." The act forced instant reaction. Karen arrived in a fury, demanding Daniel stop, threatening fines and police intervention. But Daniel had anticipated every rule and counter-written every move. He documented every encounter, CC'd legal aid in every correspondence, and posted polite, factual updates in the neighborhood social media group. Daniel's protest grabbed attention. Neighbors who had kept their heads down started whispering questions. Why did this keep happening to certain owners? Why were rules always changed at the last minute? Why did the board have so much unchecked power? That evening, a local reporter sought comment. Within days, Karen's grip on the narrative faltered. Board members began resigning or distancing themselves. The fence had made visible what had been hidden, the abusive process, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the risks faced by anyone who simply wanted to be left in peace. Daniel stood by his cabin, the morning sun glinting off the water, finally able to step inside again. Officially, his ownership had never changed. The cabin was returned after an emergency audit forced by outside attention, the board's actions deemed an abuse of power. Karen stepped down for personal reasons, and her son quietly disappeared from the neighborhood. As rumors faded, policy review committees were launched. The neighborhood, once silent, buzzed with conversation about reform and accountability. But for Daniel, the impact ran deeper than a returned deed. Trust had been shattered. He had learned how easily a system built for community could be twisted for private gain. The fence, first a symbol of desperation, became a lasting reminder of the importance of standing up, of refusing to be quietly erased. Neighbors who'd once kept to themselves stopped to chat. Some admitted they too had felt harassed or targeted, though never to the same extent. They thanked Daniel for making the invisible visible, for giving them the courage to demand better. As Daniel took down the last section of fencing, people gathered to help, turning protest into shared celebration. The moment passed into neighborhood lore, the time an ordinary person took on extraordinary injustice, and won, not with anger, but with determination and truth. Now, years later, the question Daniel returns to is not why this happened, but how many others have lost their peace, their homes, or their hope to those who abuse power while hiding behind rules. If it happened here in this well-tended community, how much more goes unseen elsewhere? What would you do if your home was on the line? How far would you go to protect what matters most? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone else find their voice.